Now, let's take a look at how fashionable trendy diets are designed, how they work, and especially how to identify their telltale signs so we can recognize them and avoid them, because they are bad news for our health. Now, a normal balanced diet is made up of the calories we require daily, 55% of which come from carbohydrates, mostly complex ones like starch, the green part of the graph, 30% of which come from fats, the yellow part of the graph, and the rest, about 15%, which comes from protein, the orange part of the graph. The vast majority of slimming diets do not fit into this particular unvarying model. The most popular weight loss diets over the last century have come with all sorts of names, like, to name just a few, the Atkins diet, the Scarsdale, the Beverly Hills, and the most extreme, the Paleo and the Dukan diet, and the ones deriving from this. However, the idea behind these diets has always been more or less the same. They all tend to cut the carbohydrates down to 20% or even as few as 5%. Look at the differences between a normal diet as recommended by the scientific community and the typical low-carb slimming diet. Because the amount of calories we require daily does not change, if you reduce one area of intake, then the other two areas, the fats and proteins, must increase. This excessive amount of protein puts the liver and the kidneys under stress. In the same way, an overlarge intake of meat can lead to the start of cardiovascular diseases, hardening of the arteries, stroke, and even heart attack because of the saturated animal fats that meat contains. These diets are loaded with fats, which in the long term can be a bad thing, because fats do not fill us up the way carbohydrates do, and they contain more than twice as many calories as carbohydrates do, 9 as opposed to 4 per gram. Why does the typical low-carb diet work only in the short to medium term? Because the sort of diet where we pretty well cut out a whole food group, the carbohydrates, the bread, pasta, rice, couscous and grains, is a monotonous diet. If we continually try to eat 100, 2, 3, 4, 500 grams of meat, at a certain point we begin to feel sick, because our body craves variety. There's also the fact that protein is the most satiating macronutrient food. The more protein we eat, the less we get hungry. That's it in a nutshell. So, what happens? Let's try to imagine that the area of this cycle represents the total number of calories that a person eats in one day. What happens when he or she passes from a normal diet to a typical slimming diet? If we superimpose the two cycles, we can see that the person on the slimming diet assumes fewer calories, for example, passing from 2000 to 1500 kilocalories per day. In the long term, eating this way is counterproductive because it isn't good for you. Many world-class experts are saying that in order to prevent obesity, you actually have to increase the amount of carbohydrates, the very opposite that the typical fad diets propose, and raising the amount of carbohydrates from 55% to 65%, and reducing fats from 30 to 20%. Just look at what type of diet the over 100s eat. For example, the people who live on the islands of Okinawa in Japan, one of the longest living people of the world. So, following these guidelines, a balanced diet which affords us a long life and keeps us slim has to be one where we eat lots of rice and peas, beans and pasta, and vegetable soup with legumes and cereals in it.